Okay, this next video is about what do you do on Tuesday with these warm-ups. If you remember, we talked about Monday. We just previewed the questions, question 1, 2, and 3, and we made a pat list here and by the title. Well, Tuesday is just reading. In fact, you might have students that as you're introducing this, you might say, okay, let's review pat lists, da 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 da. Later on, after students are used to this, they know that they come in your classroom and they have their warm up ready and they're just reading with that purpose in mind. Now, as you know and prove, and this step is we're not just reading it, we're not just sitting back like an old man reading the newspaper. We are reading for a purpose and for a job, and that job is described in our PAT list. And so here I tell students, you have 3 things on your PAT list. I want you to at least highlight 3 things in the poem. And I can remember the poem's on the other side of this paper, 2-sided poem on one side, these instructions and interaction work on the other, and students are taking that poem and highlighting 3 things, one from each, at least one PAT list evidence as it shows up in the poem. It's also a time to bring to awareness students that where we have the question here that says, what is the most likely reason the poet includes lines 15 and 16? That doesn't mean we're just highlighting all of lines 15 and 16. That it doesn't say, can you find lines 15 and 16? It says, what's the reason the poet includes those? It might say within those lines, there might be a word or phrase in there. It might be before or after, etc. Something I've loved seeing students do with this step in the past is they will color code their PAT list items, or they'll number them. Maybe they'll say 1, 2, and 3, and then when they annotate in the poem, they'll write 1, 2, and 3. Or they will make number 1 on their PAT list pink, and their number 2 yellow, and number 3 blue. And the students come up with their own systems, which I love seeing. That's something you could help encourage students to do, or even have your own process for your classroom. But I also enjoy seeing the processes students come up with that make sense most to them in their heads. And then I have here, write 5 connections or hashtags in the margin. So we're not just highlighting, we are also writing some notes off to the side. If we highlight something that says the mother squirrel is kind, maybe write the word kind off to the side, or what made that a kind situation, or it's an action, it's a thought, it's describe what's happening that made you highlight what you highlighted, pretty much. And those are the notes students are making in the margin. Then I don't just stop there, especially as we are being introduced to this strategy and students are learning how to use this strategy really well. I will have students, before we wrap up, and I'll say, okay, take 2 more minutes, finish up your warm up. And then before they turn it in or before they put it up, I will tell students, okay, I want you to turn to a partner and I want you to compare what your partner highlighted and marked, annotated with what you have. And if they have something that's really good that's highlighted, feel free to use that idea on your own paper too. And again, that is, you have the framework of the PROVE strategy helping lead that conversation. It's not like you have to sit there and say, okay, now I want you to talk with a partner about what you found to be important in the poem, about how the mother squirrel is kind, how the windy setting, like you saying all those things, students are going to get lost in those instructions when really they know what they were supposed to highlight. They've highlighted for a purpose, and now they're having a conversation about it that's more natural, and they'll say, oh, I highlighted this because of this PAT list item. It's directing them in all the right places. It's also focused to where they're going to end up with it, which is these 3 questions. It's not just highlighting stuff that is great to highlight for the poem, but nothing to do with what they're going to be asked about at the end of it. If they're just highlighting similes and metaphors, and then they get to these questions, they're going to go, well, why was I doing that? And so this is really helping support them with conversations before even getting to those answer choices, which hopefully will help and yield in a better response and result. So I love this step. This is probably one of my favorite days on the warm-ups because students can really have good conversations before they even get to the questions themselves as to why they chose what they chose. So that is what happens on Tuesday for the reading step, and we'll go on to Wednesday in the next video.